Hey guys, it's Jason here with Bamboo Acres. Today I want to go over some basic pruning tips and techniques and tricks when it comes to pruning your fruit trees. This year we're working on a Bing cherry tree and it's in some desperate need of help. So come along and watch out how we do this. Okay, so first things first is pruner maintenance. This may seem silly, but it's a very important step if you can do this. Sterilization of your blades. So you don't want to spread any kind of potential diseases from tree to tree, especially if you're working with several of the same species of trees. So get yourself a rag, a washcloth, and some rubbing alcohol. Make sure that you wipe down your blades good. Don't be afraid to oversaturate your blade, but you don't want to necessarily waste the rubbing alcohol. But getting in there, you can see the sap and everything there on the blade. We want to get that off. The biggest thing is when you're done, clean your blade as best as possible, but when you're done, the blade should be dry. You don't want to be cutting with wet rubbing alcohol on your blade, but it only takes maybe 30 seconds for it to completely dry and you're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so here you guys, we have what's called a Bing cherry tree. They're a wonderful producing tree here in the Pacific Northwest. It's one of my favorites, and it's about 5 years old or so, give or take. So before we jump into this, it's a good idea to come up with an idea and a plan of how you're going to tackle doing this. Some very basic rules of thumb is establish good leaders for your tree. With the cherry tree, you don't want a single leader, at least preference of mine. I like having an odd number, preferably, so I'll either pick 3 main leaders or I'll pick 5 main leaders, and then I'll build off of that. Right now, being this juvenile tree, I'm going to establish 5 leaders off of this tree. So we're going to come in here, look the tree over, assess the tree, and figure out what are going to be my best main leaders. Also, we want to talk about is our bud structure on here as well. So a very important thing to know about cherry trees is that their fruit blossoms only appear on the wood on the tree that is at least 2 years or older. So that's extremely important. We'll talk about that later when we get into pruning other species of trees. Apples, for example, are on the first year wood, whereas cherries are 2 years or older. So if we zoom in here and we take a look here, we have some bud clusters, and I want to point some of this out. So if you can see this, I don't know if you can see it here on the camera, but we have a very pointy bud here in the middle here, and here's another one here. It might be easier to see this one, but right there in the center, it comes to a sharp point, whereas these other clustered buds around here, they're kind of fatter, rounder, and these are the rounded ones are going to be our fruit producing. So these are all going to be flowers. The one in the middle is going to be vegetation. So that's going to be a branch that's coming out of this cluster. So keep that in mind. So now if we kind of pan out here and we look, we have all of this fruiting buds here, up and down along here. And then when we move up here, we have these single buds. These are going to be vegetative growth. So we want to keep that in mind. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our buds, a little bit more, and we're going to talk about our growth and where the different growth was. So if you look closely here, you see those little wrinkles there, and just below that is all of our fruiting buds here, the flower buds. Then coming to right there, from here all the way up is last year's growth. I cut it off there. You can see where I made my cut last year, right there at the end. So now if you look, all of these buds here, these are going to be vegetative growth. None of these should be flower buds. And again, this is last year's growth, and that's why. Again, you come underneath here where these rings are, and down below, this whole branch is from the year before, which would make this at least 2 years old, and that's why we have all of these big flower buds here. Okay, so let's look at our structure. Before we start making cuts, the number one thing we want to eliminate is dead or dieback of any sort. So take a look at the tree, assess the tree, see if you see any dieback. This is a juvenile tree. The only thing that I see that is dead is this tiny little branch right there, and that was a poor cut on either the nursery or myself. I'm gonna blame the nursery because I don't think I would have left something that long. But get all your dieback. because your dieback is never going to magically come back to life. So eliminate that, get rid of that. And the other important thing is to cut it back as far back as possible, because if you leave dieback, it's going to rot. And what's going to happen is that's going to rot into the center of the tree, and then that just opens up basically a giant wound inside the tree, and it's a channel and a pathway for insects and things to get in there. Being that this is at the top of a tree, should this be a bigger tree and I leave a giant rotten spot right there, water's going to wick in there and it's just going to pool and find itself rotting all the way down your tree. This is a young enough tree, that's a small enough wound there to where it can scar over, should have no problem scarring over within the next year or two, and we won't have to worry about that. So let's talk about structure. With your fruit trees, you want your center of your tree pretty open. You want good airflow, and you want good light to penetrate through there. You don't want it dense. You also don't want branches coming back over each other. You want to try and eliminate that. So think of everything going out diagonally. So these branches, things like this, we don't want these branches coming back at each other. You can have a little bit, but not far. Don't go past the center with the branch going backwards. Eventually I'll probably just remove this branch altogether, but that brings me on to the next topic, is sacrificial branches. So for this guy, for example, I don't want to lose all my fruit wood, but this is a crap branch. I don't want this branch, but I'm going to leave it this year because I have a couple good cherry clusters. I've also decided that I'm going to take off this lower branch to make it a little bit more even with each other. Your lower branches are going to get shaded out anyways, and they're not going to produce good fruit because they're being shaded out by your upper branches. So, and I want to be able to move underneath here and have other landscape plants down here eventually. So we're going to end up cutting this whole branch off. Probably do it, I haven't decided if I'm going to do it this year or not. I'll start with everything else and we'll see what the tree looks like. Another good rule of thumb is think of thirds. The standard rule is you don't want to take more than 1/3 of a tree when you're pruning it off. You can do up to 50% or half, but that's normally in an emergent situation where you have something that's just too overgrown, or maybe it's threatening a building or something like that. But try to stick to 1/3. That's the best rule of thumb when it comes to pruning. So something else too, especially with these juvenile trees, you pick them up from the nursery, and this is something that gets overlooked quite frequently. I've seen it a lot. Homeowners will buy these trees, they'll leave these tags on, which is great to be able to identify what tree you have. But here's where the problem is. You get these tags and they start to grow into the tree, and this is called girdling. A lot of people call it choking. It's not choking, it's called girdling the tree. And what happens is it digs in, and I've caught this soon enough obviously to where it's not really dug in, but you can see a little discoloration there on the bark right there. But you don't want to let that grow into the tree. Part of what some of this that you're seeing there is a wound from this tag. I had removed it unfortunately before we started filming, but this tag was growing into the tree there, and it's not good. It's not healthy for the tree, and it will girdle the tree and kill your tree. What's happening is it's growing into that bark, and it cuts into the cambium layer, and it can't send nutrients and energy up and down, and it just dies. It's like basically a tourniquet left on a ligament, and you'll lose it eventually if you leave it. All right, so let's get started in taking some cuts here. Another thing, the next most important thing from deadwood is eliminating anything that's rubbing or going to be rubbing in the future. So this little guy here, these are all vegetative buds. It's trying to take over as a whole nother leader here. And if you look and follow it up here, it's coming up here and it's already touching and rubbing. So we definitely want to remove that. And the reason being is because if this rubs for too long, it's going to basically chafe the tree there and cause a wound. You'll see sap starting to pour out of it, and it will rub right through the cambium layer of the tree. So we want to remove that from rubbing. You don't want anything going backwards back into the center of the tree and rubbing. Now we're going to move along here, and I'm just going to kind of talk out loud and explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and hopefully it makes sense to you all. So here we have a branch, it's on this side of the tree, but it's going backwards through the center of the tree. We don't want that. We're gonna eliminate that altogether. So I'm gonna cut it right here. Remember, you can't put anything back, so start small if you have to. Don't get a little wild and crazy and just start taking too much, because you can't put it back, obviously. So now looking at this, I like this branch. This is a good, strong branch. It's leaning at a nice angle. These branches over the years, underweight. By next year, this branch will probably be down to here. By the end of this year, I'll be down to here, I'm sorry. Under all that fruit load and vegetative growth. So you kind of have to have an idea of what the future is going to look like and be imaginative when you're pruning. All these branches are going to start to weigh out. So be mindful of that as you're setting up yourself for these next cuts. I don't like that this one's going in, so we're going to take this guy. And I'm going to take it right in here, try not to damage these other buds there. Just like that. Okay, so here we got another branch. It's coming from this side over the center. We don't want that. We're going to cut this guy off. And with this guy, we have another one from over here to over there. Again, we want to leave our center open. So I'll leave these couple little cluster of buds here. Those will be kind of sacrificial buds, branches, and eliminate that. Let's talk about these vegetative buds. Think of your vegetative buds and your leaves. Leaves are like solar panels for your tree. They're collecting all this energy from the sunlight. If we eliminate too many vegetative buds, you're not going to have a good balance and you're not going to have a good fruit yield. So it's important that you leave enough branches to continue to feed and nourish the tree, setting you up for the next year's production, and also helping you just keep that overall tree happy and healthy and collecting enough energy. So let's continue on and let's look at this. Again, talking about this one, I like this one. I like this one here. So we got 2. Here we have 3. And we'll call this 4, 5. So that will be our main leaders. I'm gonna call this a sacrificial branch. It has some good flowering buds on there. I'm gonna leave it alone so I can get these cherries off of here. Same thing with this guy. Not a healthy branch, but there's some good buds there. So we're gonna leave it be. It should have enough light that these should produce pretty well this year on this branch. With the intention of next year, I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna cut it right here and open this up some more. Here's a branch coming back at us. We don't want that, so I'm gonna take it right here. So here's another one from the outside going to the center. We're gonna eliminate this guy, but we'll leave a cluster there. So we'll cut it there. I think I've decided I'm going to leave this as a sacrificial branch. I don't want to lose these good cherry buds this year. So, but I am going to take some of these branches off. So these lower branches, you don't want on any of your fruit trees. You don't want branches aiming down towards the ground, because remember, under load, they're just going to continue to point down, and eventually they'll be pointing completely straight down. You want them at angles like this. So take that there. Take it back here. And I'm going to leave this one here. So I have a couple vegetative branches there, and I'm going to use these to help fuel and feed these blossom buds there. Watch what you're stepping on. Don't want this branch here, because again, remember, underweight, it's going to be down here. This is going to be pointing more down at the ground, so we're going to remove it there. And pay attention to hear how I'm cutting. So if you look here, you see these little wrinkles here. I want to cut right in front of them. It's important that your pruners are sharp so you get a nice clean edge there, and then that should scar over really quick. So looking at this branch here, I'm going to tip this, and then the trick is what do I want to be my new leader? I don't want to lose this branch. I want to keep this branch, but wherever I end it is going to be my new main leader. So just looking at the bud placement here, I like this bud right here. If you can see that there. This guy's aiming up at an angle. So by cutting it right here like this guy's now going to shoot up more at an angle. I like that because remember, it's flat now. By next year, it will be down. So we're going to choose this guy here. And now that's going to come out looking like a branch like that this next year when this thing pops and starts to grow. So be mindful of which way your buds are pointing when you make your cuts out here. This guy I'm going to cut from here. And this one I'm going to take that here. There. All right, now I need to do some trimming on my leaders. I'm trying to keep most of these are semi-dwarf varieties. I'm trying to keep them at a manageable height. So don't be afraid to top them. And I like where this bud's going here. Get around to where you can see that. This guy's going to be coming up at a nice angle, and you can see how this branch kind of slopes off that way. So I'm going to take it right there. Now, keep in mind, this next year, this will all be fruiting wood down here. And you want to keep it semi-level. So looking at my height there, I will take it right here, come around to the other side so you can see this bud right there. That's the one I chose to leave. I'm gonna do the same because I got my bamboo encroaching on this. So we'll take it right here. Not continue with bamboo, and I'll end up taking back some of this bamboo too to kind of open it up. Remember, your fruit trees need lots of light. If you want good producing fruit, you need to give them lots of light. So this guy, I'm going to take that branch off. Take this guy here. And we'll take this guy here. Alright. And this one, I don't want that crossover, so I will take it right there. And that is it. I think we're done with this tree. Again, we're going to save these two as our sacrificial branches. So these will come off next year. But for the time being, I don't want to lose my fruit. And we only want to take off a third. If I go and take off those, we'd be pushing our third limit. So we're going to keep those this year and then eliminate those this next year. I'll have plenty of branches to decide to take off from these new leaders that are left. I'm not considering this a leader, but it has good fruit blossoms on there, so we're going to use this as just a fruiting branch for this year. So this very well may be a sacrificial branch as well, but we'll play it by ear. But I think we've done enough on this tree this year. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you this year when pruning your cherry trees. And stay tuned, we'll be working on some apple trees and plum trees next. Thank you.